I really need to get my animal's armor. What's up, guys? It's your boy Yuya Nagamura. We're actually playing Monster Hunter Rise today, and not for any particular reason, other than addressing a few things that I have kind of been running through my head here, have had running through my head recently.
Yoink.
And it has to do with main weapons. Yeah, I'm back on this topic. Now, there's two types of players in how they address a main weapon, or a main character, is a good example as well. And that's using a specific weapon in Monster Hunter. Well, I addressed this in my main video, addressing like mains and stuff in that video. So I'll keep this one mostly focused on Monster Hunter and the Monster Hunter weapons themselves. So first off, what is a main weapon? Well, it's the weapon that you're going to be doing most of your hunts with. It's the weapon you're attempting to learn the most. It's the weapon that you're going to end up most likely relying on as your dedicated way of dealing damage to these big, dangerous monsters. As I mentioned before in my Switch Axe video, Switch Axe is my main weapon, but it didn't technically start that way. You see, when it comes to Monster Hunter, there is a lot of weapons. And sometimes your preference in a weapon will change depending on the game. Yes, there are those players that they'll stick it out with every game and every weapon, but there's also almost this stigma that you have to stick with one weapon when you're playing one of these games. Now, obviously, switching weapons a lot is going to make it to where you don't master anything. And obviously, rust can also play a factor into you not doing nearly as good in a hunt as you normally would. Like myself, I haven't played Monster Hunter in a hot minute, so I'm a little bit rusty right now. But it's not because I don't understand the weapon. I've used this weapon enough for me to understand the weapon and its setups and intricacies. It just comes with, I haven't been playing.
Let's go.
Now, just because you're using a single weapon does not mean that you need to stick with that one weapon forever. You can always branch out and try something new. And yes, I know a lot of people, there are going to probably be people that are like, oh, you should stick to a single weapon. But let's say you're in a situation like me. So I started off with dual blades, and my biggest complaint with dual blades never really went away no matter how much I played the weapon. Like, yeah, sure, it does decent damage. It's a multiple attack kind of weapon. But my biggest complaint with the weapon has always been a very clear-cut way of using the weapon is kind of just playing hyperly aggressive and not getting hit, focusing heavily on just nothing. Realistically speaking, it's just kind of a weapon that turns the brain off. Which, yeah, I mean, that's definitely something I can do in Rise. But trying to realistically adapt my own play style into GU or World, games that really don't allow that, the weapon isn't fun to me because I can't really apply my own play style to the weapon. Which is, in its own way, is a massive problem for me enjoying the weapon in anything other than Rise. I've mentioned before, every weapon in Rise feels good, and I really appreciate being able to play a game that every weapon feels right at home when you pick it up. But I've also ran into the issue that the further I go back, because I did start as Rise as realistically my first title, but it's not the first Monster Hunter I played. I played a lot of modded stuff with my friend on 3DS. He had 2 3DSs, so it was a perfect fit. And in that, I pretty much gravitated towards Switch Axe. Mostly due to the fact of, big sword, big axe, and I just thought it looked cool. Plus it being modded, we could really make it whatever we wanted. So it became a really fun weapon to screw around with.
Reloading.
And, I've had people ask me what my main weapon is. I've been back and forth with a main weapon between like Hunting Horn, Longsword, and Set Glaive. Realistically, it's all been really hard for me to justify what I want to main, what my actual main weapon is. Like, there's just a bunch of things that go into it.
Goodbye.
But picking a main weapon for me was rather difficult because even when I was maining a weapon like Dual Blades, playing the weapon with friends was fun. Playing the weapon alone, I wasn't really having that much fun. I felt like I wasn't doing much damage. I felt like I wasn't really doing what I wanted to do in the game. Oh, Rathian. Rathian, why? Rathian, why? But, yeah, no, like, the weapon was a weapon that I wasn't really enjoying in a playing alone setting, but it was something I enjoyed playing with friends when I picked it up. The biggest issue with that is actually you start to build a mentality very quickly when you start playing games with other people, especially if you've spent most of your time as a solo gamer. You really notice that your preferences playing alone are not your preferences playing it with other people. Like, sure, you can like use whatever, honestly. Like, I've noticed that I can realistically use any weapon playing with other people. Because it's not really about, playing the game with me, trying to get stuff done, or trying to just be an overly aggressive dick the entire time, or anything of the nature. It's more just me trying to have fun with the guys. And the more I do play Monster Hunter, the more I catch these very uncommon, like, traits that I don't traditionally realize I have until after days or even months of me playing and realizing my preferences with a weapon. Granted, I also took a break from the game for a while, and that was largely due to Dual Blades themselves. I found myself, when I was trying to play solo, getting more upset with myself, or just in general getting upset that I wasn't able to successfully kill a monster, which, I shouldn't be raging at the first time, period, but for some reason I was catching myself doing that a lot, which really made it hard for me to justify sticking with the weapon. So I started researching other weapons, trying to find my preference, screwing around with other weapons, and found, well, Switch Axe. Granted, when I first got into Monster Hunter Rise, I tried every weapon for a little bit, and was like, oh yeah, I could vibe with this. But granted, I also found a lot of weapons that I didn't initially like, and a lot of that actually had to do with the fact of I don't think my mind was really thinking about how I was going to be playing this game as a whole. It was just, oh, find a weapon that does, you know, something that you can just be fine with, because no weapon's going to feel good to you because you don't know what you're looking for. And again, this is one of those kind of aha moments of you really have to play the game for a bit, finding your preference in with weapons and what you're willing to use. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've questioned myself on why I didn't just pick Switch Axe from the start. But then I think about it, and it was an overly complicated weapon that, without me having prior knowledge of how Monster Hunter Rise even works, it required too much for me to really get into. That, and there are weapons like Longsword that obviously stuck out to me. I would have gladly stuck with that weapon, but watching videos on people talking about the weapon and how, like, everyone used it made me really want, well, not everyone, but it being an overly popular weapon, it made me realize that it's not something I realistically want to use, just due to the fact of I like to use weapons in any game that allows me to, that maybe aren't the best weapon in the game, but are definitely, you know, something that if I can get good with. That was me just being smart there. That could have one-shot. That was me being bad at dodging.
Thanks, buddy.
But I've also found myself thoroughly enjoying a bunch of different weapons because of taking the time to play them and find out if I even vibe with them. Like, I might not be a Switch Axe, I might not be like the bowgun type of person, but I found I can vibe with a couple of the weapons. I say, before dedicating to a main weapon, don't do what I did and play through the entire game with a weapon. Give them like 10 hunts. Obviously, learn the game first and then go from there. But then dedicate to actively trying to, like, find that weapon. Learn the game first. Take every weapon into a few hunts. You'll find something that you like eventually. And even if you don't, maybe you just find out you don't like Monster Hunter, and that's okay. Let's be honest. You don't have to like every game that comes out or other games that your friends like. I like Monster Hunter, but if someone said, nah man, I'm not a fan of Monster Hunter, I would be like, yeah, and that's entirely okay. If you're not into Monster Hunter, I understand. It's not everyone's cup of tea. For the most part, I'm not going to do multiple hunts. I am trying to...
What is it?
Are
you foraging or upgrading?
Ugh, plates. Okay. So, Nargacuga, and I still gotta get a plate.
What do you need?
So, other than
Are you foraging or upgrading? Come
other
to
than
me
that,
if
I
you
didn't
need
really
new
have
gear.
too much to talk about here. Though I will address one other small thing while I'm in the village, and that's don't be scared to just play the game how you want. I know that a lot of people are like, oh yeah, you know, you gotta be optimal. You have to play the game the way that, you know, everyone else does. Or, you know, take things like super seriously. Like you're a hunter, your goal is to blank. But it's a game, guys. Like, if you are having fun, you are achieving the goals that you have set in mind. Oh, that's an interesting one. Now, as for what I would recommend for you to attempt to start with, and in all
Have a look
honesty, I'm
around.
going to give essentially weapons that have varying styles of feel that will force you to learn a few mechanics, but at the same time, it's helpful to know these weapons because it really does give you a different preference in styles. Obviously, great sword being the main one that I tell a lot of people to start and try for a couple hunts. It really does give you a sense of patience. It's a very, very slow weapon, so you have to find those openings. And when you find those openings, you need to exploit the hell out of them with your big ass damage. The higher the numbers, the higher the damage. The higher the damage, the sooner the thing dies, and you can move on to the next thing. Or speed up your hunting. Specifically, taking your time with this weapon and learning some patience can be super helpful for really any game, actually. Because you don't have the ability to just hit the opponent constantly. You actively have to find an opening for when to swing the weapon. And some people have the patience for it, and others, they don't have that patience. And that's okay. That it's not their preference. But learning some greatsword is always going to be helpful. Hammer really teaches you about positioning. It's also one of the knockout weapons in the game. There's a couple weapons that are for exhausting the monsters to slow them down and knocking them out. Hammer being the main one I recommend. People pick up and try. It can be basic, but in all honesty, there's also a lot of complexities to it. So to just pick it up for the first time and using it, you might just end up swinging the weapon a few times blindly and not caring. But when you start getting good with it and start actively like pinpointing locations that matter, it can really change up how a hunt feels. It can change up how you address fighting a monster. It's one of those weapons that there is a clear weak point for said weapon, and you should be aiming for it all the time. As for weapons that I say have interesting mechanics that, you know, starts teaching you more, it's not just about doing damage. Insect Glaive is a great example. Insect Glaive has this like multi-layer ability thing that really gives you access to a bunch of things. Kinsects are a good example of something that's very interesting, and it's just a very complicated, complex weapon that has you doing both ground and aerial combos, and just has this wide, like, overly flushed out move pool and different ways of using the weapon and utilizing the weapon, that extracting like essences to get buffs and then utilizing those buffs so you can do more damage, or later game you get access to a silk bind that allows you to throw the Kinsect to do a bunch of damage. There's just a bunch of interesting things that the weapon can do that, in all honesty, I like the Insect Glaive. It's an insanely fun weapon too, but it's not everyone's preference. If you like it and you like having the options of both ground and air combat, it's definitely going to be that weapon that I'm going to recommend to you, just for you to have that varying options. But you've also got a bunch of other ways to utilize it, and every Monster Hunter it's been in has had a lot of different effects. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, like, I'm going to just put every bowgun here as well as the bow. You should take the time to at least try and get some practice in with these weapons if you can. The bowguns are pretty expensive though. They're kind of money whores, and will eat up your what is it, gold or zenny or whatever it might be for your money in game very quickly for ammo types if you're not willing to take the time to grind them. They can be very expensive weapons in the overall scheme of things, but they can be really fun, honestly. I don't see why too many people don't give them a try, myself included. I was like, I don't really feel like playing this game like an FPS, but I realized very quickly that having access to a gunner weapon, it really is helpful in some of those hunts where you might not be getting any openings. You might not be getting many openings to even try and hit the monster with. And in those cases, the gunners can be super helpful, putting the monster to sleep, putting the monster in paralysis, poisoning it, hell, even being useful for trapping it at range. Gunners do take more damage, so they are at risk. So you do run that risk every time you pick up that weapon of being one-shot by something that normally wouldn't one-shot you. But they can buff, they can heal, they can do a bunch of things. They can be both a support and a DPS. They're a useful thing that you should try and at least pick up one and find one you vibe with. If you don't vibe with any of them, that's okay. It's not for everyone. Charge Blade is complicated. I'm sorry. I'm in that boat of people that this weapon is super complicated. And I do recommend people pick it up and give it a few tries and, like, see what you can figure out with the weapon. But there's so much to this weapon that it really gives you a sense of whether or not you're wanting to play one of the complicated weapons, or if you're wanting to be a big dumb barbarian just beating things with a stick. Which is okay, by all means. If just doing damage is something you're interested in doing, go for it. If you're interested in a highly complicated weapon like Charge Blade, there's a couple options for you to utilize. They're very flashy. They do a lot of damage. They take a lot of time and practice to get good with, and once you get good with them, it's really hard for any other weapon to be too complicated for you to master. Now, using the weapon on the bare bones basic level, this weapon is still very fun. I'd actually say it's a little more aggressive than Sword and Shield, honestly. But it's still a fun weapon. I can't really give too much recommendation to it, because Charge Blade's one of those weapons I want to get good with, but it's taking more time to learn that weapon than anything else. Also, just know, I'm going to be doing this Insect Glaive video at some point this week, so stay tuned for that. Hunting Horn definitely teaches you about both hyperly aggressive gameplay paired with a purpose. It really does teach you that everything you're doing does matter. I hate the fact there's so few Hunting Horn mains because it's just a weapon that not many people can vibe with because you just run into this issue. In all honesty, this is a weapon I have both geared towards and also fallen off of a bunch of times. Hunting Horn is a very awesome weapon and a very awesome support tool for you to utilize to help the party out. And it kills me that I can't stick with this weapon because of the weapons I tried when I first started. This was the weapon I originally wanted to use, but I knew it wasn't just going to be me playing Rise. I knew it was going to be me going back to World, and we were talking about Generations Ultimate. I had to pick a weapon that I knew for a fact I could vibe with. And I'm sorry, World and GU, I can't really vibe with the Hunting Horn. And that's just how it is. But I do have honest opinions of all of these weapons coming up that I'm still talking about. So I'm keeping some of these descriptions very loose so I can go in depth into those videos. And the final weapon I'm really going to tell people to pick up and try is Dual Blades. Yes, it does small milky numbers. It's a lot of milky numbers though. It does a bunch of them. And if you're not really interested into that, I can understand. I'm really not a huge fan of how little damage it feels like I'm doing. You are doing more damage than you think, but it does feel like you're not really doing anything in the fight. It really makes you... After a while, when you play alone, it feels like you're not contributing to the hunts at all. But I've pulled out other weapons, and in all honesty... Dual Blades are one of those weapons that, if you're just trying to get a feel for the game, it's definitely a good weapon to, like, default to. Because it's super quick, and if you're into, like, hack and slashes, it's an easy pick for just a weapon that's super quick for you to kind of get a feel for how the game mechanics work. Now, again, this is another weapon that suffers from... I technically started in Rise and had a bunch of weapons I wanted to main, so I ended up picking this one as like my starting weapon and just left it as my main through essentially the entirety of Rise. And that was a combination of A, being lazy, and B, not really knowing what weapon I wanted to use, so I just stuck to it because it was the first weapon I picked up, which I shouldn't have done in the first place. I should have used the weapon a bit, been open about the fact that I like it playing with friends, but I don't like playing with it alone, and went from there. But it's really hard for, you to say, hey, I don't like this weapon when I'm playing alone, but I can still play it with friends. That's the issue I have with it in GU, and that's the issue I have with it in World. I can use it playing with friends, but when it comes to playing alone, good luck getting me to play this weapon anymore. It's not as fun to me to see those smaller numbers coming off constantly. It's not really an enjoyable weapon for me knowing that I'm chip damaging the entire way through. Again, I'm still technically doing the damage because I have more opportunities to swing on the monster and not be at risk. But even with that, it's not a weapon that I can find myself constantly wanting to come back to when I'm playing the game, because Dual Blades really isn't a weapon I enjoy alone. But again, playing with friends, it's a whole nother situation. There's one more weapon I'll recommend, and that's Sword and Shield. And the only reason I'm going to recommend this is it's a super basic weapon that allows you to realistically get access to a bunch of really beginner helping things to try and ease you into Monster Hunter without you having to full-fledged jump into knowing how to use something. Sword and Shield is one of those weapons that it can kind of just be swung anywhere on the monster and work. It's got a bunch of really powerful attacks that do decent damage. Destroyer oils in World is strong as hell, and just in general, oils in general. Sword and Shield is a weapon I actively complained about making hunts feel too basic and too easy, but it's because the weapon is geared towards people who are new and needing a weapon that's actually reliable, that's going to not only help them learn the game, but it's got a very low skill ceiling when it comes to mastering the weapon. The weapon is not hard to master like some other weapons can be, because there's not too many mechanics you have to keep track of. It's a great weapon to just enjoy the game. It's a great weapon for you to pick up as a new player and get a feel for things. And it's just a good weapon in general for people who maybe aren't going to take this game as hyperly serious as other people. The weapon is only boring to me, and I've come to the realization now, and the reason why I don't like that it makes hunts feel easier is actually due to the fact of I picked the weapon up after I got good. The weapon would have been more fun to me at the very start if I would have actively stuck with Sword and Shield from the very start of the game to now. It wouldn't feel the same way. It would actually feel like Sword and Shield was that good baseline for me to be at, and then like if I would have moved over to Dual Blades at that point, it would have changed the situation to where I would have been like, yeah, I might not be the biggest fan of Dual Blades, but it's only because it feels like these hunts are taking more effort to complete. But again, it's just the kind of player I am. I've never really stuck to too much when it comes to games, so you really run into that issue a lot where most people who will stick with a single weapon, I envy them. I wish I could do that, but I realistically can't. I come from hack and slash players. I come from fighting games. I come from trying to just find that one thing that you enjoy in a game, that thing that you can actively be like, okay, this is the only thing I'm going to use the entire game. That doesn't really exist for me. And that's largely due to the fact of, well, I've never really had those constraints, especially playing alone. If I liked a weapon or a character or a build in a game, I was never constrained to just using that. I was like, yeah, sure, there are penalizing factors for not knowing how to play a character that you've never played in a fighting game. But there's also no penalizing factors for it if you decide, okay, well, I've been playing these characters that I've mastered for a while now, and whereas, yes, they're fun, I also seek to, learn more, get better with other characters, and improve as a player, and not just be associated with this one group of characters or this one character in game. I feel like a good example of this is Monster Hunter. Like, sure, you could be the best longsword main in the entire game, but if you're having fun with it, then let's be honest, that's not the problem. The problem really stems from,
See ya.
oh, I'm not really enjoying this weapon. Oh, I'm not really, having fun with the game anymore. And I have this issue a lot myself, where I'll go from enjoying something in a game
Have a look at
to, once I get to harder
Take
missions,
care.
it's less about enjoying the weapon or enjoying... A good example is Monster Hunter, actually.
See ya.
Because I run into this issue a lot with Monster Hunter, where I enjoy a weapon,
Yup.
but there are just some monsters I
Get
don't
hunted.
enjoy at all. Like, there's some monsters that I just don't enjoy fighting no matter what. And in all honesty, there are Monster Hunter games that I've played that I find myself not enjoying
Hey, you.
any of the weapons to the degree I enjoy in other games. This probably just comes from the fact of I'm a pretty big, I got a lot of opinions, or I should say, on what I think something should feel like. And I'm not saying that weapons, as the further you go back, shouldn't feel either clunky or, unpolished. I'm more saying, at the end of the day, I'm gonna use what I enjoy for said game. And if that means that I'm not mastering any weapons or mastering any characters in a game,
Hang in there.
like, I'll just accept that. Because at the end of the day, I'm not playing games for any other reason than I'm just having fun. That's just part of what I enjoy doing. I like gaming because it's fun. And that's really why I say, if you find a weapon that you enjoy, definitely give it a few more hunts. Wait till mid-game. See how you feel after you've used it through the village. And if you find yourself not enjoying it for whatever reason, maybe take the time to switch off and see if there's something you might like better. Or take a little bit of extra time to reevaluate what you actually want to do with the game. Who knows, maybe you're like me and you're not a fan of a weapon type in specific games, like GU is a good example. And maybe you find something that you normally wouldn't vibe with that you find yourself gravitating towards more later down the road. People don't stay the same, so if your opinions change, if you feel like the weapon that you're playing now is not what you want to use when you come back to the game in like 2 or 3 years, or the next weapon or like the next game comes out and there's like this new weapon you're wanting to use, go ahead and try it. If Wilds comes out and let's say you're a longsword main, but you're not a fan of, you just don't feel like you want to use longsword again because you're wanting to try something else, you not only do you have 2 weapon slots, so you can try 2 different weapons, but you can also just drop the weapon entirely and start from scratch. That's one of the nice draws of Monster Hunter. Starting the game from the very beginning, starting from a fresh feel of the game, and maybe changing what weapon you're gonna main for the game is kind of just part of what your starting experience should be. Like, a good example is Generations Ultimate. As much as I've said I want to main Switch Axe in Monster Hunter's Generations Ultimate, I'm probably going to play Sword and Shield. It's the weapon I started with, it's the weapon I grinded out, and if I alternate between that and Greatsword, it's only because Greatsword's another weapon that I actively used. Honestly, I think what's going to end up happening with Generations Ultimate is I'm going to sit down and actually play the game through the village fully, decide what I actively want to use as my main weapon, and then when I finally go to the hub, I know exactly how I feel about every weapon and how I feel about every type of skill that they have, and just have a preference, have that final decision of this is the weapon I'm maining. Just like World, I spent numerous months trying to find what I was going to main in World. And spoiler alert, to no one's surprise, it's not the weapon that I started with in the game. I started with bow in World. I started with dual blades in World. I started with a bunch of weapons in World and kept dropping weapons because the game didn't feel like Rise, the game that I knew the most. And it took a sec for me to really get used to how World does things, and I had to find what weapon I enjoyed with World that made it feel right. I had to find that weapon that fit the best for me in game, and that ended up being Insect Glaive. So that raises the question. Is it wrong for me to want to move away from dual blades, or should I stick it out? By all means, I understand that there's going to be this split and divide in the comment section, and please keep everyone's opinions very positive, because I really want you guys to have your own opinions, obviously, but I really want you guys to respect others' opinions and realize that this isn't just something that's, going to have one correct answer. We have all got our opinions on it. So, from one hunter to another, should we switch our weapons? Is changing mains, if you find something you enjoy more, wrong, or is it right? I'd love to hear everyone's opinions in the comment section, and I would also love you guys to like the video, and if we hit 50 subs, I'm going to start streaming, and I'd love to do some Monster Hunter World live streams and playing with fans and just in general having a good time. So that being said, I've eaten up enough of your time. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day. This is Yuya Nagamura signing off. Peace. One more thing before I forget. Stay positive, everyone.